Hi boys and girls, today we're going to start one of our favorite units, which is ceramics. In this video, I'm going to tell you a few things that you need to know about clay, about firing, about glazing, and then some rules and expectations of the art room when we're using clay. So stay tuned, pay attention, and get ready to learn. So clay comes from the earth. The clay that we use came from the earth at one point, but then we don't actually get it from the earth. We order it from the art supply store. There are two types of clay that we have in our classroom. There's terracotta, which is a reddish, brownish looking clay. We usually call it red clay, even though it usually looks brown. And there's white clay, which doesn't really look white when you get it, but once it's fired, it will turn white. So when you come up, you can pick either red or white. Now, clay goes through a process, and we can actually do what's called recycling clay. So clay, when we get it, is plastic. It's squishable, it's moldable, it'll usually hold its form. If it has too much water in it, it turns into what we call slip, which is a really, really watered down clay. If I'm going to attach two pieces of clay, I'll use slip or watered down clay as my glue. Then, as our clay dries out, the water comes out of it and it turns into what we call bone dry clay. Bone dry clay has all of the moisture sucked out of it. It's super, super delicate. So we really don't want to handle it a whole lot at this point. Once all the water is sucked out, it's ready to go into the kiln. But if I decide that I don't like this piece, what I can do is put it in a bucket with some water and I can recycle it back to plastic clay. So now, here we are in the kiln room. So this is the tiny little room that you guys see me go in and out of during our ceramics project. It's really important that you understand that the kiln room is not a place for students. If I invite you in to show you something or to get me something, you're more than welcome to come in, but it's not a place that you should be by yourself. Now, the kiln room keeps all kinds of cool stuff. On this shelf is where I keep our stuff to dry before it goes into the kiln. Remember, it has to be all the way bone dry before it can go into the kiln. The kiln is a special oven that heats up to 2,500 degrees. That is super, super hot. It's way hotter than your oven gets at home. So firing clay isn't something that you could do at home and then put in your oven there. There's other types of clay for that. So I put the clay into the kiln and it has to cook or fire for 12 hours. It takes a really long time. After that, it has to cool down before I can open up the kiln. So it usually takes a day and a half to 2 days for the clay to cool down. Now, once it comes out of the kiln, it's called greenware. It's not because it's green, it's just the name of it. Now, clay will look a little bit different when it comes out of the kiln. So our red clay that looked brown before now looks kind of orange. And our white clay looks a lot closer to white. At this point, we're ready to start glazing. So glaze is a special type of paint that's only used in ceramics. So when you add the glaze onto your ceramics, it's not going to look really pretty. There's a couple things to remember. It's not going to look this color when it comes out of the kiln the second time. And also, it's going to be a lot shinier. So we call the glazes really matte. They're a little bit chalky. They actually have a base of clay, which is what makes them so chalky. To get a really nicely glazed piece, we probably have to add 2 or 3 coats of glaze. After you're done glazing, it goes into the kiln for its second firing. the glaze firing is when the magic really happens. So your ceramics go back in for 12 hours at 2,500 degrees, and then they cool down for 2 days. And then we have a finished ceramic piece. The glaze is actually going to turn into a really shiny, glassy, glossy finish, which is really, really beautiful. It's really fun because a lot of times we don't know what it's going to look like until it comes out of the kiln. You guys have been a great audience, and it's almost time for us to start our ceramics projects. Before we start, we have to go over a couple of rules. It's really important. This is such a special project, and it's going to be the only time during the year that we get to do ceramics. It's so important that you take your time and really make this the best you can possibly make it. We don't want to rush through our projects and get done in 5 minutes because maybe that's not our best work. Second, when you're done with clay, you have to wash your hands super, super well. Because clay comes from the earth, it kind of feels like mud. So it's going to leave your hands dusty and dirty. Soap, water, paper towel. The last thing you have to do when you're done with your pot, you have to get a clay tool and write your initials on the bottom so that I know who it belongs to. You can then bring your piece to me over at the kiln room and I'll put it on the shelf to dry. So the last thing we're going to do is get ready to start. You're going to meet me over at the clay table. You're going to grab a board and tell me what color of clay you want. Do you want red clay or white clay? Try to think of that before you come meet me at the clay table. After that, you're going to take your board and your clay back to your table. Carry it like a pizza. We don't want our clay to fall off the board onto the floor. Then you can begin working on your project. If you have a question, who's the first person you should ask? That's right. Always ask 3 before me. All right, my friends, I hope you have so much fun. Let's get started on our ceramics.